Martha Stewart ran her mouth. Martha Stewart did not understand practical politics. Martha Stewart went to jail. She ran her mouth all the way to jail. Martha Stewart could have easily handed them a card to her lawyer. I'm sure she has several lawyers and several cards on her at all time. She could have handed whoever was asking her that, the prosecutor, she could have handed him a card to her attorney and say, I have nothing to say. She could have stayed on point. She could have said, I have nothing to say. Please call my attorney. You know, this happened a long time ago. I need to collect my records. I have nothing to say. I have nothing to say. I have nothing to say. That's an exercise in practical politics. Martha Stewart ran her mouth, and she ran it all the way to jail. We don't want to run our mouths. We want to make our point. You see, saying I have nothing to say and handing someone a card to your lawyer is making a point. We want to always make our point. If we open up our mouths, we want to have something intelligent to say. Hopefully that makes sense to you. So what's the first talking point I want to introduce you to? The first one is quite simple. Many of you are used to you've seen something dynamic happen maybe in the last 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, especially in the last 12, because we're right on time. Maybe you're one of these old-timers walking around Texas who always say, I'm a racist, and you've said it for 30 years. Now you're seeing people pay attention to you. They don't really care anymore, or they're agreeing with you. Well, that's good. That you're seeing neutralization. This is very dynamic stuff I'm teaching you. But one thing you want to always make a point of is interjecting yourself in the conversation. I'm going to show you a broader way to say that's not illegal in any country. You see, saying I'm a racist in Britain in London can get goofy stuff can happen, but they can't do anything about what we're showing you how to do. You see, weaving velvet is a little more dynamic. It cannot be stopped once it's started. It is more violent than grenades against a structure because there's no protection against it. The first talking point I'm going to give you is, in your opinion, I'm a racist. You're just saying that because I'm white. Anti-racism is a code word for anti-white. In your opinion, I'm a racist. You're just saying that because I'm white. Anti-racism is a code word for anti-white. In your opinion, I'm a racist. You're just saying that because I'm white. Anti-racism is a code word for anti-white. You see, what they've done is say all whites are racist for years, and basically most of you have noticed this. What I'm doing is pointing it out indirectly that can never be illegal or anything else. This type of stuff gives them fits in a closed society. What I want you doing, though, is taking moral authority over a group. I don't deal in me's, I deal with we's, making sure I never get in the way of us. So all my stuff is dynamic. Every time me or Bob give you something, it can be repeated by anyone, anywhere. You see, in your opinion, he's a racist, you're just saying it because he's white. In your opinion, she's a racist, you're just saying it because he's white. In your opinion, that old man's a racist, you're just saying it because he's white. You can say it if you're brown, you can say it if you're black. It doesn't matter, it's dynamic. Very dynamic. Saying I am a racist is not necessarily dynamic. You're just talking about yourself. It's wonderful. It can work. It can give you moral authority. But what we do is very dynamic and can never be outlawed, period. And that's why it gives them fits. The second one is kind of funny. Mexico for the Mexicans, Africa for the Africans, white countries for everybody. And you can change it around. Muslim countries for the Muslims, Asia for the Asians, white countries for everybody. You can keep changing it around. It's funny. It's dynamic. It's true. If you could get 100,000 Muslims trouncing around London and pass that around and have them shout that at Westminster, you might even be able to get BNP to swing an election or to push a behind-the-scenes negotiation really quickly. It's a humiliation technique. See, a lot of this stuff is humiliating. A lot of people have been conned and they're angry. And the first step toward a con is not admitting it. The second step is kind of like despondence. You kind of want to ignore that you've been conned, but you're admitting you've been conned. You know, it admittance, and now you're admitting it. The third step is anger, and a lot of people are becoming angry, and what you're doing is giving them outlet. You're also humiliating the major group going against us, the Lone Rangers, the self-hating white people. Your enemy is basically all looks like you and has no loyalty to you. But that's what it does. It's a humiliation technique, and it is kind of humiliating for the liberals to hear that screamed at them. It's funny. Most of you guys want to argue. That's what you're geared for. That doesn't work. Talking points work, making your point, and this is geared toward, again, a closed society. A closed society is a society based on the fact that it owns the truth. They know diversity doesn't work because as soon as they stop enforcing it, you're going to all move to part of the planet and they're not going to have any power. Now they got problems. They got problems, big problems. So what we want to do is start humiliating the Lone Rangers and the people that look like us and are trying to speak for us. We want to start humiliating them, and this is a great technique. It's insidious. It's not illegal, but they fear it more than they fear anything, believe it or not. And that's kind of why they will always ignore this stuff and ignore Bob until they can't. But it is one of the reasons too. You've seen them have Clint Eastwood talk about diversity and stuff. They're panicking. They're panicking because they know what we're doing. This stuff is already in other countries. Yes, we are global. I'm not idealistic, which means I don't believe in any wordism. Nationalism is a form of wordism. I'm a white rabbit, you're a white rabbit. I don't see language as a barrier. We get around that. I got associates everywhere. Someone like me operates everywhere. And so should you. And that's wonderful. You belong to an organization where you automatically belong to mine. I'm not interested in your organization. I'm just interested in making sure you have effective equipment so when you open up your mouth, you make it an exercise in personal power at all times. If you want to maintain visibility or you want to get visible, well, you need to have the precise thing to say. That's just common sense. What I want you to say in regards to immigration is quite simple right now. No one is talking about flooding Mexico, or it's not a Mexican problem. No one's talking about flooding Mexico with non-Mexicans and giving them affirmative action, special rights and privileges, and free health care. It's not an African problem. No one's talking about flooding Africa with non-Africans and giving them affirmative action, special rights and privileges, and free health care. Oh, and it's not an Asian problem. No one's talking about flooding Asia with non-Asians and giving them affirmative action, special rights and privileges, and free health care. Only white countries are being flooded. Only white politicians are doing it, and only white children are being affected. It's genocide. You made your point. Listen to what I said again and make your point. No one's talking about flooding Mexico with non-Mexicans and giving them affirmative action, special rights and privileges, and free health care. No one's talking about African. It's not an African problem. And giving them affirmative action, special rights and privileges, and free health care. No one's talking about flooding Asia with non-Asian and giving them affirmative action, special rights and privileges, free health care. Only white countries are doing it. Only white children are being affected. Only white politicians are doing it. And it's genocide. You can make it your own. You could certainly say, no one's talking about flooding Muslim countries. Use your imagination. What you're doing is making a point. You're not arguing. We're not here to argue. We're here to make our point against a society that's coming out of a demoralized state quickly. Also, many of you have heard this used against children every day, and many of it, growing up, is used all the time. Race is a social construct. There are no social constructs under international law. Most of you think that the law, maybe you know now that the law is not very nice, but international law is some of the most ruthless laws you can deal with. The type of laws that the Russians, the FSB looks at, and different human rights groups look at, the type of laws we deal with are nothing to fool with. The type of laws that someone like us would have at our exposure, that Bob has great contacts in, and that we're starting to look at, are nothing in any way, shape, manner, or form to fool with. Saddam Hussein was not hung in a Wild Wild West type of deal. Saddam Hussein was hung in a tribunal. He wasn't shot in the head. He had velvet wrapped around his neck. And you need to understand that we have this at our disposal. Anytime prior to 1948, you could do anything you wanted and called war. Post 1948, it comes into full spectrum. Practical politics started. In international law, you cannot target. When I say target, means you cannot target a genotype, that's where you get the word genocide, an ethnic group, or religion in any way, shape, manner, form, or harm, or destruction. You're thinking right away I'm talking about mustard gas, and Saddam Hussein fired mustard gas at the Kurds. Well, that's true. But it's much more dynamic than that. It's not static. This stuff is not static. I don't deal with static things. It is any type of targeting whatsoever for harm or damage. If you're crazy enough to go on the record, someone's crazy enough to have you on the record, you're crazy enough to fund building the weapons. It doesn't matter if it's mustard gas or social engineering. If you're targeting under international law, you are owned. You cannot get in that lettuce patch. Lettuce patches are always illegal to rabbit. Stick to your peas and carrots. International law is ruthless. You see, there's no voting. There's no voting at a tribunal. There's no voting at an ICC, an international criminal. There's no voting. There are no voting by jurors. Your lawyer won't matter. Forget your priest, forget your lawyer, forget your rabbi, get a violinist. If something like me is at your door and you're going to tribunal, you're over with. You're done. You're done. The banks that financed it could be done. Everything. It's one big bowl of soup at once. It is ruthless. And you can assume, most of you are thinking someone's in trouble in Anglosphere. That's true. You see, there was a clear targeting. And from mid 1960s to late